We're going to talk about growing a giving church. Lyle Schaller once said, the majority of congregations are not organized to teach stewardship or encourage a higher level of giving. They're organized to minimize expenditure. And someone else has said, most churches are not organized to teach stewardship. They have a financial problem, not a giving problem. I am Jim Highland. And in this time that I spend with you, we're going to cover the challenges we have in growing stewardship, the principles that can be used and principles of leadership, and then some simple ways in which to go at it. Over the last 30 years, I've worked with more than 200 churches, helping them face major stewardship challenges, building programs, growth in ministry, and in the midst of that have learned some things that I would like to share with you. I'm a graduate of Georgetown College in Kentucky, Southern Seminary in Kentucky, and then Luther Rice Seminary in Atlanta. There are some giving patterns that are still real for us today. The 80-20 rule still rules. Most churches give somewhere between 15 to 25% of their tithe potential. And that simply says that if you could sit down with a pencil and pad or calculator and figure out what is the average annual income of a family and how many families are giving, and take a tithe of that, 10% of that, your giving would come up somewhere between 15 to 25% of that number. Studies have shown that over the last several years, since the year 2000, individual giving in churches has dropped 19%. We're in the midst of a recession now, and I know that they've dropped another 10% during this time. The other thing that has happened in amongst us is that as we become more affluent, we become less generous, less regular in our giving, and we have a changing attitude about our giving. This chart will help you see how I look at giving in the life of the church. You'll see the center line across through there. That is what is called budget base. If you put in that the amount of money your church receives in its budget in a year, you then would begin to look at the first line down, and you would be talking about 20%, 40%, and 40%. You would see there that 40% of that money that's yours, that you receive, comes from 10% of your people. The next 40% comes from the next 20% of your people, and then the rest of it comes from another 20%, which is 50% of your people giving 100% of the gifts and income that your church has. Another way to look at it is in the next line, where it says nominal givers, ministry givers, or tithers. Tithers and ministry supporters give from two entirely different focuses. The tither gives, of course, out of their income. They give their proportionate amount of tithe from their income. Ministry supporters, whatever their income is, they give a certain amount to support a particular ministry, a particular cost, even the total budget of your church. And the nominal givers should give on the basis of how much money they happen to have when they come to church on that particular occasion. And the third line there, I'm talking about long-term members, short-term members, and newest members. I found that newest members need to be trained and shown how to give, and it takes you somewhere about 6 months to get them to where they're giving. Short-term members are ones that are easiest to make a difference in terms of giving and appeals for giving and growth in their giving. And long-term members, it's very difficult sometimes to make those kinds of changes. There are some changing paradigms happening in our churches. And I want to look at them very quickly with you, because there is a changing mentality of the people who come to our churches. Many of them come who used to be participators, and now they're consumers, like coming in a cafeteria line, taking what you want and leaving. Many of them come who used to be participators, and they feel like spectators. They distance themselves from the activities, ministries of the church, and many of them come to a church where they would have had personal relationships, not a very formal membership. Many churches are defined in different ways, different niches, whether it's young adult, type of music, the style of worship that they had. There's emerging into our midst what we call parachurch. Parachurch organizations are those that are cast alongside of churches, and they do ministry. They do kingdom work, and they receive a lot of money, a whole lot of money. They represent the efforts of several people who they would call themselves spiritual entrepreneurs, who want to give something to make things happen outside the controlling factor of the church. Most churches do not move fast enough on things they want the church to be doing. And so because of that, they give their money to an evangelistic association, to a mission group, to some group that's doing very, very good in a national scene or certainly even in a local scene, and they are parachurch. Mega churches are writing their own script these days, primarily staff-driven, and primarily governed by those same staff persons. So in the midst of that, we have lots of changes happening. How is this impacting our churches? Well, let me talk to you about that. Younger members are coming to our churches, married, 2 children, coming in our doors. They're the same people that left our churches in their early teens. They come back wanting church and spiritual foundation for themselves, their family, and for their children. But they've missed a whole chapter of spiritual formation and church development. They don't know how church works. They might come in with a business model and think it ought to work like that. That's a challenge for us. They become candidates for leadership, but they may not even understand how to do leadership, and they certainly don't understand how that leadership are the ones who need to lead in their giving. We have new models of church structures where churches govern themselves differently in different ways. We have a whole mix of denominational backgrounds coming in our churches that are not even fitting in to who we say that we are. But that's okay. I pastor a small country church in Middle Tennessee, where in my congregation on any given Sunday I have people coming from a Catholic background and from a charismatic background, and I'm in Baptist. I guess that's Middle Land. So in the midst of that, we are also learning to talk a new vocabulary. Our vocabulary these days is highly related to our computers, you know. We talk about interfacing with each other or dealing with a sidebar. And so our message, the vocabulary of our message needs to be changing, though the message itself doesn't change. These are stewardship challenges that we're always seeking to address. The greatest challenge, I think, is the generational issues in our churches. We have now 5 distinct generations, 4 that are very clear to us here, but I want to talk about, that are making decisions and guiding our church. Builders, boomers, busters, and bridgers. Let's talk about them and what happens to them and how they look at church and giving. Now, I can talk to you about builders because I'm one of them, 60 and up as far as you want to go. We're called traditionalists, and most of us are. The things that shaped our life were such things as World War II. Some of us, the Great Depression. I had a group of people older than me came out of that. They told me they've been depressed ever since. But the thing that I found that impacted my life more than anything else and the world around me was the thing called GI Bill, where the soldiers coming back from World War II got a free education in any school they wanted to go to. And out of that, we created the middle-class people and manufacturing, managing people that has made America as great as it is. Some of the factors that dominate my generation are that we have loyalty. We have issues and troubles, but they unite us, they don't divide us. And we have an attitude about giving that it's an opportunity to give back. We have a loyalty to institutions. We're frugal, but we're givers, and we're unselfish in our givers. Now, the biggest generation to come along are the boomers. And the things that shaped them would be things like the Vietnam War, the assassinations of a president, Martin Luther King, Watergate. Those are things that shaped their lives. The dominant factors about them are this. They created most of the trends that we're still enjoying. They created most of the affluence that we're still enjoying. Most of them were highly educated. They were acquirers. They wanted not just one house, but two, not just one car, but three. And they were very involved in community and growth and doing the best that we could. Issues divide them, though. And they created a consumer mentality that we're still living by. How do they give? Well, they're somewhat cynical, but they're optimistic. They give to specific projects. They like hands-on things. They want to be included. They want accountability for the money that they give. They want to see what happens. This is a generation that has invented or created a two-income family. And most of our families now are two incomes. And they're the sandwich generation between the children that they're raising and the parents that they're taking care of in older age. And they listen to WIIFM, what's in it for me. The buster generation comes along, and of course the pendulum swings back the other way. This is a group that, taking the fact that the boomers learned a little bit about computers, this is a generation that has picked up on computers and technology and has taken it to its zenith. They're the ones that enjoyed the growing prosperity of the boomers and then decided, well, I'm not so sure I like it that way. They're the ones that created and enjoyed instant communication, email, and whatever else you could do, cell phones. And they're the ones that have a different, distinctive way of thinking about things. Their dominant factors is they're skeptical of institutions. The speed of life that has increased around them has caused them to be somewhat guarded and cautious and aloof. And they're not easily impressed by wealth or by fame. And how do they give? They give skeptically. They want hands-on involvement. They're not acquirers, but they value the simple life. And they have a larger vision for social change that they wanted people to fit into. And then the generation that we know so little about called bridgers, teens through 26. Their life-shaping events all of us know about. .com bubble burst, Oklahoma City bombing, 9/11, corporate greed and falling, things like that, parents divorcing. 75% of these persons never attended church since childhood. What's their dominant factors? They're uncertain about the future. They want a place to belong. They lack security within themselves and stability within themselves, come out of troubled homes and troubled peers around them, and they seek connectedness as family. It may not be their parents, but as family. Their giving attitudes are still being shaped. Technology is going to play a major role in that because most of these live with a computer in front of them. Now, with all of these, what kind of economic attitudes are we seeing? Well, I don't think we've seen it. It's just become more so. The changing attitude about money. Money defines everything in life. You've heard of the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rule. That is very true here. Money is, for those of us who believe in Jesus, it is coined life. It is life that we put into money that we can exchange for things that we want to support and give to and all of that. So we need a changing attitude about money, but we need to see that what we do with that has some connotation to our faith. This is a group of people that have a lot of discretionary income. That brings to them a more complex life. It also gives to them a different giving pattern. Most of the people in our churches today will only give a certain portion of what they can give to a local church. They like to have some money to give to a TV evangelist or an evangelistic association or a mission group or a college or an institution. So there is a discretionary giving that happens in their lives. Most of these people have a guardedness about appeals and giving. And there is within them what I call a silent agreement. They really don't want the church talking about money. They really don't want to hear church talk at church. They spend their life going around saying, oh, how much is this, how much is that, and pricing everything. Come to church, they really don't want to hear that and talk about it. So we live in a world where their economic attitudes are being shaped. Leadership issues are being shaped by these generations also. There is a evolving or dissolving trust in churches and church leaders. Church is one of several things that would be good to support. We have the parachurch organizations and the personalities within them. And the changing role of pastor is that the pastor is more and more seen as an administrator and less of a pastoral person, a chaplain, a spiritual guide, a spiritual director. Changing role of laypersons is that more and more of them are needed to get in the church and do things. The most costly thing in church life today is staff salaries. And churches must find a way to train and develop staff laypersons to do so much in the life of the church that they used to think it was very easy to do by just hiring somebody to do it. I want to define for you stewardship in a different way perhaps than you've had it before. Stewardship as a spiritual issue, not a financial issue. I want to use some words that all end in ship, like forming a relationship. Stewardship is first affected by the relationship we have both with Jesus and with the local church. And so we need to form a relationship and lead people to form a relationship that's warm and connected to the Lord Jesus and to the church. Discipleship is the next step. Once a person forms a relationship with Jesus, we need to be developing discipleship in their lives. That is, following Jesus. And finally, establishing lordship, that He is Lord of all. Now, what we're talking about here is shaping a mental attitude and a lifestyle, a mental model, if you will. And these become a way in which people have the opportunity to witness even when they don't know that they're witnessing. Giving is a great way for us to show our commitment to the Lord Jesus. It's also a great way to make an investment in things that's going to last even for eternity. So, how do we put all this into ministry in the local church? Well, here's the first thing I want you to think about. We intend to grow a church, not just gather a crowd. Growing a church is like growing a body. It has many parts, but they're all uniquely different. It has purpose. It has function. Crowd just simply has a gathering of people that come once a week, hear a good speaker, get good music, and leave. What we need to be about in the stewardship of our ministry is growing a good church and growing churches that have a sense of stewardship about not just finances, but mission and purpose and things like that. To do that, we need to develop a serious strategy to develop biblical discipleship. Discipleship meaning following Jesus Christ, understanding from the biblical record what that really means, and putting it into life. One of the ways we do that is to redefine stewardship in our contemporary times. It is not all just giving a 10% or whatever we give and going on our way. It's talking about lordship, which is 100%. And then letting that shape our life and all that we do. One of the things that we find ourselves needing to do is to project a vision for what a Christian disciple really looks like. Part of that we're going to talk about in a little bit when we are talking about walking the talk. And then finally, we put all of this into eternal perspective because it was Jesus who said, you can't take it with you. You got to send it on ahead, go lay up treasures in heaven. So that becomes a part of the challenge that we do. Now here's the negative message of all this. How not to grow a giving church. And the only one I'm going to do, but it's important to hear this. Number one, do not use the budget as the central tool or promotion piece to grow giving. A budget is a management tool on how the money is going to be spent. It is not a promotion piece. In fact, most anybody in your church that picks up your budget can find something they like and something they dislike. Something they like very much and something they dislike very much. They may look at it and see the mission cause, the youth program, or the senior adult program and say, oh, that's really good. They may look at salaries and say, that much is going to salaries? What are all those people doing? And so it becomes a controversial issue. And it's also a control tool. Because when people look at that, they may say, now how can what I want go into this budget? And they don't have a voice in it. And so it's not a good tool for that. Secondly, how not to grow a giving church is to allow leaderships or a handful of leaders to control the giving opportunities and in some way keeping the expectations of people low. There are people in every church that I've been in that want to keep the expectations low so they will not have to give very much themselves. They're a leader, but they don't want that price to get very high. So many times there's a handful of people who wanted to do what they want to do with the money, or they want to control it. The third thing I would say is that we find ourselves majoring on perceived or certain needs and not discipleship, not the big picture, but we need the roof, we need the youth program, we need this, we need that. We wear the word need out in our churches. And then I think the fourth thing I say is that we do not yield to the silent conspiracy about giving. The silent conspiracy about giving is don't talk about giving at church. One of the things we do, though, is develop a theology of giving, a belief system about what stewardship really means to us. You see, money is a very natural part of our life. It is coined life. Stewardship is a dimension of discipleship. It's what we do with our money, just like what we do with our time and opportunities in many other ways. Stewardship standards are pretty well set, but they're good places to start. Tithing is a good place to start. But Rick Warren recently talked about the fact that he was living off of 10% now and giving 90%. That's pretty good for a Baptist preacher. Giving is an expression of our gratitude and faith. Let it be that. It is not giving up to give. In fact, it's the opposite. It's getting the opportunity to give. And the whole thing is wrapped around the Lordship of Jesus Christ. Now, if that be true, I think stewardship is good news. Good news to the person who is invited to participate. And good news to all of us as we share that message with them. So, how do we go about this? We affirm some principles about giving. Number one is, giving's personal. We all know that. But it's not private. Jesus stood beside the giving of the people in the temple and watched a widow give her mite. That's M-I-T-E, by the way, not M-I-G-H-T. Watched them give. Many times we use the passage of Scripture that said, don't let the left hand know what the right hand does. That works real well if neither hand is doing very much. But I believe that giving can be a very powerful witness if done in the right way. Giving is a spiritual, not a financial issue. When I want to talk to people about giving, I want to talk to them about it from the standpoint of where they are spiritually and where they would like to go spiritually and how much they're willing to invest in that particular area and growth area of their spiritual life. But leadership is always by example. We have to do it before we can talk it. So the Bible talks about giving as to be joyful and willing. We who have been in this business a long time say God does love a cheerful giver, but He also receives from a grouch, and we receive that too. Giving is an act of obedience, a response of gratitude and love, and an expression of faith and trust. That's what giving is. Now, how do we lead this? How do we make this happen? Several years ago, a study was done of what leaders do. And they came out with 5 things that I believe are fantastic in trying to define what leaders do. And if you just add to it of the church, or whatever phrase on the end of that, you'll see it. Number one, leaders challenge the growth process of the church. Leaders challenge the way that people give. In other words, instead of just accepting things as they are, leaders say, we can do better. Instead of accepting the amount of money that comes in and says that's what God wants us to have, we then begin to say, we can do better. Leaders always challenge the growth process and push it out. Leaders inspire others with a shared vision. Underscore that word, shared vision. Many times we show up as a leader in the church to say, I have this vision of what I think we ought to do for God. And they listen very carefully, but don't join you. But if indeed we listen among our people and talk to them and ask what they want and talk and listen to them as they tell you what they want, you come out with a shared vision that everybody can find something in there that they really, really like. And when they do, then they're ready to go with you. So you inspire them with that. Leaders enable others to participate. We've all seen leaders who didn't really want anybody else to be a hero, or at least to participate publicly. That doesn't work. Most of us are better if we double ourselves and triple ourselves by getting others to participate with us. And so leaders help other people participate. We train them, we work them, we take them by hand, we pray for them, we enable them to participate. Leaders model the way. It's not do what I say, it's watch what I do and follow me. And that's a big thing in leadership. And the fifth thing is very important. Leaders encourage the hearts of others by word and deed. I don't know exactly how we can say thank you to all the people who give to our churches all the time so faithfully and so quietly. For the last 2 times I've worked as director of development of 2 organizations outside the church. And I can tell you that we do a good job of thanking people for their gift. We don't know how to do that at church. We really can't say we got a club of this that grows bigger than others, something like that. But we do need to be saying thank you as many ways as we can to as many people as we can. If nothing else, go through the congregation, shake everybody's hand, and say thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, I have 7 stewardship ideas on which I want to hang what I've talked about. How do we put all this into real life in churches? And the first one is this. We need to develop for ourselves and for the church we serve a passionate mission plan. We need to be able to say who we are, what we do, and why we're doing it. Our purpose, our values, our vision. Now, we could go to the Bible and find the Great Commission, go into all the world. We can go to our values and say you shall love God and love man. You love your neighbor as yourself. Go to Jeremiah and says, I have a plan for you. But we need to be able to write it on the back of a business card. So I find that churches do best to define themselves with simple words like, we love God, we love people, we love to lead people to Jesus, and we love to develop people in their faith. Can you say what your church really does on a consistent way? Do you talk about it all the time? We're in the danger of doing church so often that it becomes mundane. The little girl sat one time in a church, watched people as they did their thing, wrote a little note on a bulletin that somebody else found, and the note was this: they do it every Sunday. They'll be okay by Monday. It's just a little habit they've acquired. We don't want to be into the habit business. We need to be able to keep telling people over and over and over again what we're about, why we do it, and what it's going to look like when we accomplish it, what vision we really have. It's so important that we do that. Giving is always enhanced when you keep talking to people about what you're asking them to invest in, to give to, what they're going to accomplish as they do it. So as in the cultivating of stewardship, we're always at telling people why the church is here, what its accomplishment, what they would want to achieve in the process, and how they can be a part of it. That's a powerful idea. We need to do it every Sunday. The second idea is this. We need to engage leadership in our churches as mission partners. I don't know where you find yourself as a leader or participating as a minister. Many times we come to churches that already have had other pastors. They already have leaders selected, and they're in place. Now, what happens there is this. We come with a fresh, strong zeal about it. They've been there a long time. They're tired, or at least they're worn out, or they're distracted. But one way or the other, we find them in a very passive place. It's tempting to us to say, let's just wire around them. Let's go around them and find somebody that's really got a lot of zeal, and let's put them to work. But you need these people with you also. So good stewardship is bringing your leaders with you as you do, and moving them from being the passive leaders to the passionate leaders. Every leader you have is there because somebody listens to them, puts trust in them. They are people that have assumed leadership or been put in place of leadership because somebody trusts them. What they say will be just as important as what you say, and you cannot wire around them. So I think it's important for all of us to recognize that we need to take leadership in our churches and bring them aboard first and help them join you in accomplishing things. We not only need to move them from passiveness to passion, but from their comfort place, their convenience place, to a place of challenge. Attitudes are more caught than taught. I believe that we need to be in the business of trying to grow leaders in our churches that can say what we feel like we're trying to do, can get other people to go with us as we're trying to go there, and can challenge others to join us in that walk. So a simple idea is we have to work with our leaders as our partners in growing churches. Our commitment, though, and idea 3 is this. We need to make ministry and outreach the first priority of our church. Now, having described the church that I just did, you know there's other priorities in every church you go into. First priority sometimes is just keeping the doors open. A second one might be taking care of those within the walls. That's a big priority of traditional churches. And that's one reason why they're plateauing and dying. They're taking care of their own. As one person said, we're running a Chinese laundry and we're only laundering for the family. So when that happens, there is no zeal for looking outside. So you have to build a vision for people outside the walls of the church and the funding it's going to take to get there. Most of the people in our churches, especially if our churches are plateaued, are giving to the level of what I call perceived need. And they will give, regardless of how you talk to them, they perceive how much the church needs, and they're just about right. They will come in with a few dollars, any special offering you need, they'll come in real close on that, and they'll tell you a lot by their giving, more than by their words. So our job is to bring people to the understanding that our mission, our purpose, is for those outside the church. Now, we do that in a number of ways. We do that both in coaching and in doing. The coaching factor is taking the approach of education, spiritual formation, and doing the things that's important to make people understand what we're doing. I have become a fan of 40-day programs simply because I find them to be extremely effective. several years ago in an interim pastorate that I was in, I went into a church that was pretty well disturbed by the fact that they had to fire the pastor. They all agreed that they needed to fire the pastor. They only disagreed on how it was done, and so they were mad at each other. At that time, Rick Warren's 40 Days of Purpose was out, and churches were beginning to use it, and I brought it to that little church, and we did it. And they read the book, which is a great book. They sat down every Sunday and talked to themselves. They watched his presentation before they went into their time to talk, and they talked about their church. Healing came to that church. And I walked away from there thinking, there's got to be something good about that, and it is. It is giving a consistent message each day and each week, educating people along with coaching them on what to do, getting them to share and hold hands and hold hearts together as they do it. And so there is that place in which we need to do those kinds of education. I've been doing campaigns for buildings for several years now, wrapped around a 40 days of preparation format where people read a devotional guide. They begin to learn how to give on a new level. They share with each other how they're doing. When it comes around to asking them to make a commitment to give, it's pretty easy because they're ready to do it. Most recently, in the church where I serve, I put together a 40 days of preparation program for them, what I would call ministry readiness, for them to get ready what God was wanting to do with them next. And that was a real good experience for that church. They had never thought about the things I put in the daily devotion. I asked them also, along with the daily devotions, to read every day and the coming to a group to share within their Sunday school classes every Sunday. I asked them to do two things during the week. Number one was to find a ministry with somebody and do it. Whether it's a phone call, a visit to a shut-in, whatever it is, find something outside your life and outside your routine to do. And they did that. And the second thing I asked them to do was to give a Try-God offering. A Try-God offering is simply an offering you give above and beyond your regular giving that represents for you faith and sacrifice. Well, they tried that. Give them 6 envelopes for the 40 days. They began to give. In that little church that it usually takes about $4,000 a month to do budget, they had a 20% growth in their giving simply by that little way of asking them to give. It wasn't just money. It was education. It was learning habits. It was all those things together that it really takes. There are several financial programs out. The Crown materials are really good. Some others are good where you teach financial management of money, and that's good to do. I think there's things to do in terms of taking up the offering, and that is to simply talk about why we're taking up an offering every Sunday when we take it up. Read a scripture, interpret it, talk to people about why we're doing what we're doing, and keep the focus on the people outside. I'm always amazed at the number of churches today who really don't believe that having offering envelopes in their hands when they come to church is any benefit. As a consultant in stewardship, I found that one thing will increase the giving of a church 15% on a regular basis. Recently in the church that I'm talking about in the Try-God offering, and they have no offering envelopes or anything. In fact, they hardly have a budget. One of the people began to tell me about the offering envelopes, and they said the offering envelopes always reminded me as it's something I needed to do. That's what it's all about. The second thing in terms of making outreach, though, is to do it. You can coach people, you can teach people, you can preach about people, but there comes a time when you have to do it. There's lots of ways our churches are doing ministry outside of our walls, and you know of it in your area and probably doing it in your church. It's the healthiest thing that we're doing right now. Whether it be mission trips to another country, whether it be going to another city, or going down the street, or going to shut-ins, or doing a work day where we work with people who need things done around their homes, shut-ins, and things like that. We need to find ministry opportunities in our community all the time. It's very important that we're open to that. I think it's important that we talk about and stress attendance in our churches. I believe we always gain when we're trying to find more and more people to come to church. And not just accept the fact that, the people who show up are the people that God expects us to do it. I've watched giving in churches and related to attendance, and you can pretty well judge it. You can look at a church and ask them what their annual income is or annual budget is, what's their average attendance at a worship service, and divide one into the other and find out what people are giving on a regular weekly basis. And it usually turns out that the lowest level is about $10 a week per person. The highest level can go up into $30 and $40. When attendance starts falling in a church, giving starts falling also. So one of the ways that we can bring back giving to a church that's struggling is to work on attendance for two reasons. One is, of course, the more people who come, the more people who give. But the second reason is the people who are there, your very core people who are faithful to your church, will be so glad to see something is happening in the church that's good for that they approve of, and they like it, and they want people to come and share their church with them. And so they too will give and give more faithfully because of that. It's very important that we are able to stress those attendance patterns. Now, the fourth thing I want to talk about is involving the most people you can in ministry. I have found that people who are involved give better, know more, have a positive attitude, bring people to the church, do all the things that's right. People that are not involved walk in, walk out, don't say a thing about it, and don't feel attached to your church at all. There are many ways to get lots of people involved in your church. Most of our churches, whether it's yours or mine, have a way in which we select people to do certain things, whether we call it offices that they hold or committees they serve on or what have you. I'm a big fan of teams, ministry teams that can be put together quickly and dissolved anytime we need to dissolve them. Teams are so much better than committees. I believe the best committee is a committee of 3 and 2 of them stay home so the decision can be made. Committees have the attitude that, okay, who is chairman? Whoever's that chairman is going to do our work for us. We're just going to tell you what to do and be a jury about what you're doing. Teams are not like that. Teams are people who want to get involved, who sign up to become active in getting involved, and they're ready then to do the work. And they're living toward making it happen. So you can put together a team of 3 to 5 persons and ask them to do a very specific thing for the church. Most time you don't have to have official approval for it. You just get them together and say, would you do this and would you do that? And they'll do it. I believe there's a role in our churches for ongoing ministry teams that are at work. And then when that particular task is over with, they are relieved of being on that team. It's not like a committee. Most things in churches are there. You're either there 1 year, 3 years, or until Jesus comes. It's just one of the 3 ways. But in these ways, with ministry teams, you can come and go and get involved as you want to, and allows the pastor or minister, whoever is doing this, to pick and choose different people that they want to involve and they want to bless into works like that. The second thing that I think is important, though, is that we all get involved in mission projects some way in some part. This will involve more people than anything you can do in a meaningful way. That can be a mission trip. That can be a work day, as I spoke of earlier. It can be a lot of ways in which we can become involved in different things and learn to know each other. Mission projects are great fellowship projects. We learn to know some of the best people in the world when we get shoulder to shoulder with them and doing the work. So we need to learn to bring them together on mission projects. The third thing we talk about here are special fellowship opportunities. And I believe in eating. Most of our churches do. And I think it's important that we're ready to bring people together on a regular basis, even if it's a monthly birthday party, and enjoy fellowship together. Stewardship idea number 5. Communicate giving as spiritual growth. I realize that giving talks about money. And I realize that we talk a lot about meeting needs. But one of the needs that we need to keep focused on is the need of people to grow spiritually. And giving is a great discipleship building process. It makes people create priorities in their life. It creates in people's life a sense of being involved in giving outside their own little self and self-world that they're built into. And so I want to encourage you to look carefully about how do we communicate giving as a spiritual opportunity. Well, number one, we've said it before. Giving is a spiritual, not a financial issue. In my time of being with churches and having church members, I've discovered that the largest givers of our church are not those who can give the most. I've pastored millionaires and I've pastored paupers. Paupers sometimes do better than millionaires. Giving is something that comes from the heart, not the checkbook. So as we define giving, we need to define giving as a spiritual step we're going to take. You really don't grow giving by telling people that the church needs this and needs that. The greatest need that people have is that they need to learn to be givers. When they become givers, they free themselves of so many other burdens of their life. It frees them up to move on. And it is a great experience for them to learn to give. So it's a spiritual process in which they seek to please God. They seek to grow to be more like Jesus, who was a great giver. Giving grows faith and trust and obedience. After all, somebody defined tithing as giving just enough to make you pray hard about the 90% that's left. Well, giving does take some faith. There's a passage in the Bible about casting your seed in the waters. Well, that's a farming practice of that day where they would go out at flood time, take their handfuls of seed and throw it down in the water in hopes that a crop would come. But the seed was a very costly thing. They were throwing it away into the water, and it would sink down into that mud. And when the water left, that would be ready to sprout up, and they'd have a great crop. But they had to put it in there first. Well, giving is a seed we plant. It is something we do because we have faith that God is going to care for us, that His care is greater than we can ever have within ourselves. And there's that trust in Him that we offer as we give. And it's also an obedient part in which we say, I need to learn to live by His rules and not mine. Giving is a response of gratitude and love. I think it's important that we consistently help people express the gratitude that they have for Jesus and the love they have for Him and for others who follow Him. Giving is a response to that. I personally am grateful for the churches that have helped shape my life. I personally am grateful for Jesus, whose life has been so meaningful in me that has made me a far greater person in far different ways than I ever could have managed doing by myself. So giving is a response of giving and love. And giving is personal. It's something we decide, but it's not something we keep private. If the opportunity comes along, we need to be able to say, yes, I enjoy giving, and give a witness about giving. And giving is not just for institutional survival. The church is going to die if we don't give. But it's for the greater kingdom that God has us involved in, and for the world venture that He's involved in. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about how we affirm people. I'm a part of an organization, I said earlier, where we are able to say thank you to those who give. Most churches are not able to do that. The unwritten rule usually is, I don't know what it is in yours, that the pastor ought not know, the minister ought not know what people give. Well, that's a little bit hard to manage because that's a good measurement of their spiritual life. But we're not going to break that. We're just going to thank everybody we can for the support they give to the ministry of your church. After all, I think every pastor in a church is the best host that the church has, and the best thanker in the church. So there are many ways to do that. In our worship leadership, we need to find ways to express appreciation and affirm people and affirm their giving. Affirm the fact that this past year, X number of dollars have been given. Affirm the fact that God has led this group of people to give this amount and that amount, or however you want to do it. Keep talking about the positive side of giving and what people are doing. Negatives never get anything done for us. In our preaching, we need to preach about giving and stewardship, not on one sermon, and not just because we're preaching about stewardship. The old way in pastoring churches or preaching was to have one annual sermon a year. And I guess the preacher dreaded it because he didn't want to preach about it, and the people dreaded it because they didn't want to hear about it. But stewardship is so much larger than that we can learn to preach and put into the sermons that we preach Sunday after Sunday, places that talk about how we're giving and how we're serving and how we're fulfilling our mission and purpose as a church. And in our preaching, we can make a difference. The educational part of our church needs to be offering financial education, money management, as well as all other ways. It needs to help people learn how to serve, teach people how to give, teach people how to share fellowship with each other. We need to be educating people on stewardship of life, and we can. I believe there's a place in our pastoral care for affirming giving and for affirming people who give. The most obvious place is when we have the opportunity to go to some of our very faithful people in the hospital or in some other setting like that, and we affirm that person and get them to realize that we appreciate and God appreciates what they do and God knows what they do. It's so important for us to do a good job in affirmation. Now, the seventh thing I want to say is simply this. When it's all over with, please give God the credit. It's so easy for us to say, oh yeah, I thought of that. Yeah, I talked about that. I did this, I did that. Perhaps you've heard about the frog that watched all the geese fly away to the south when it was getting cold where he was living, and he wanted to get out of there. And so he talked this goose into allowing him to travel by him just grasping hold with his mouth of the foot of that goose, and the goose took off and would carry him toward Florida where he was going. Until he heard somebody say, well, that's a great idea. Who would have thought of that? And he said, I did. And the trip ended. Sometimes we get in the business of talking about I, and it hurts everything we do. It destroys the message that we have. Our people don't need to know how important we are. They need to know how important God is and how much we honor Him and trust Him. So we give God credit. It's His mission. It's His vision. It's His provision. It's His plans. It's His power. It's His people. It's His calling on our lives and calling on the people's lives who serve right next to us. And it's His blessings in our life that make all the difference in the world. So a final statement is this. The happiest people on the face of the earth are those who have discovered the joy of giving. In these days in which churches may be walking through financial hard times, I have this word to people who lead. Remember, you do people a favor when you lead them to give. By leading them to give, you lead them to grow in their faith. You lead them to grow in their freedom from being in financial bondage. You lead them to invest in something that lasts for eternity. But you also, in doing that, you lead them to realize that there are other values in life besides these. I encourage churches, pastors, to do what I call play offense, not just defense. In these days of financial hardships, more and more churches are saying we had to lay off some people, we had to do this, had to do that, and cut back. And that's probably good management. But you can't keep talking about cutting back and expect to move forward. You have to have an offensive strategy as well as a defensive strategy. Years ago, when I would walk through church buildings, there would be a little sign over a light switch that said, "Turn off this lights and save money for missions." I don't know how much money went to missions because that sign was there. I do know that it kind of sounded chintzy to me, that we're supposed to be able to doing all that. Some people appreciated it, thought the church was real frugal. It just brought me the wrong message. I believe that we need to have the right message, that we are here to lead people to give. And as people give, we can manage it through a budget and through the proper channels. It will be well managed, well invested. But we're there to lead people to grow to be like Jesus, who gave himself for us. He's a giver. We want to be like him. We become givers. You'll find in this material a list of books, reference books that I want you to look at and perhaps read. Many of those are about the generational issues. Some of them are about giving in other ways. Most of them, I think, are still in print. I would ask you to look at them and see if there's something in there that you could benefit from. Invest in learning more about how to grow a giving church.